everybody, and welcome to another review episode of The Mandalorian here on the
Geek
Buddies!
Hey! Everyone's getting real good at that. I'm very proud of everybody.
That means they're watching the shows. It's essential, so they're very kind to come on and do that ahead of time. So thank you. And as you know, I am one of your hosts here. I am the Outlaw, also known as Rocha Fett, John Rocha, joined as always by my brother in the middle there.
I'm the Outlaw's in-law, Michael Vogel, writer and producer of animated TV shows and movies.
I am not married to your daughter. And joining us again, and very kindly doing so, sitting in for Shannon, who is still on his hiatus for now, is the incredible Laura Kelly from Force Toast Pod, and of course from the Jedi Way. Good to see you, Laura. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me back, you guys. I'm excited.
What's this logo on your shirt? What is that? The fork and knife? What is
that?
Oh,
you know, this is like I rolled out of bed and got to work in my dining room / office, and then now I'm sitting here. So this is like basically my pages. It's the Chicago Hospitality United Against COVID-19.
Respect.
Oh, that's awesome. I literally was just, I glanced at it when you logged on, and I'm like, oh, Xavier's School for the Gifted. It's cool.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. That's
I clearly was not looking closely enough.
I didn't even make the connection. You know, I kind of thought that I'd be close enough that it wouldn't even show up. So I was just like, I'll just be in a black shirt. That's fine.
It'll work. It'll work. Well, you know, we're going to get into so many things here. And as Michael is very good at pointing out to me, I'm going to give the spoiler review a warning rather early. Spoiler warning early. This is a spoiler review. We are going to go into everything that happens in this episode. And my God, did Robert Rodriguez shove a lot into a 30-minute episode, give or take a couple of minutes. Pretty incredible stuff from him. Can't wait to talk about it all. So if you haven't seen the episode, again, if you haven't seen the episode, thank you very much for at least starting this episode of the Geek Buddies review. Go and watch the episode, then come on back and enjoy our analysis of it. Any words before we begin? Well, let's just start there. This is season 2, episode 6, chapter 14, The Tragedy. A very ominous title for this episode. And let's get your overall thoughts about the episode. Let's start with you, Laura, first. What did you feel about this episode overall?
So going into this episode, I kind of acknowledge this, but I'm just like, there was just no way it was going to live up to last week for me. Like nothing would have ever lived up to last week. There was nothing that they could have done, I don't think. And so I was left wanting a little bit with this episode. The characters that it focused on and brought back aren't necessarily like my favorite characters in the Star Wars universe. So I was just I felt like I was just kind of along for the ride. It was fine. It's one of those things where the ending, I was just kind of like, okay, well, that happened. That's not permanent. Like that, we're going to fix everything. So it didn't have a ton of meaning for me. Now, I acknowledge that not every episode has to have a ton of meaning for me. And last week's episode had a ton of meaning for me. So this is my off week, and that's fair. You know, this episode was for someone. It just wasn't necessarily for me.
Mike, was it for you?
That's where I'm at.
This episode was for me, but I do agree with Laura a little bit. I do think that a couple things. I think that for most, I'm never going to say most Star Wars fans again, because I keep getting called on it.
You're learning.
I too was so excited to see Ahsoka Tano brought to life that I think nothing is ever going to be as good as last week's was. Like last week's was like a pinnacle for me. That being said, they came out with this episode guns blazing. And there is so much awesome stuff. And as an old school Star Wars fan from back in the day, I felt like every 5 minutes I was like Leonardo DiCaprioing. Like I was just like pointing at the screen and screaming names of things. Including when the title came up. As soon as it said the tragedy, I just screamed in my apartment by myself. I was like, no, what's the tragedy going to be? But I do think that is what, I think Laura did hit on something. This episode was great. This episode was a bunch of stuff that needed to happen and stuff that we all kind of knew was going to happen. Now, I think that the way that they did it was amazing. They made it a feast in a lot of ways. There were a couple of surprises in there, but we've known Boba Fett was going to show up at some point. We kind of assume that Moff Gideon is going to get the upper hand at some point. That Grogu getting captured is a big shock, but not the biggest surprise. So I think this wasn't an episode that was filled with gasps and shocks and surprises because it did contain a lot of things that we were more or less expecting. But that being said, Robert Rodriguez just killed it. In 34 minutes, he got to introduce so many characters, so many ideas, had so much awesome action. So even though I wouldn't say this episode blew me out of the water, it was a fucking hell of a ride. I mean, dank Ferrick, you guys. Dank Ferrick.
Dank Ferrick. Well, I mean, you look at this episode, and it's okay. It's right after the Ahsoka Tano episode, and right before the 2 episodes that are going to be the series, the season enders for this particular season of The Mandalorian. So you're like, oh, is this the best place for me to be? And so you wouldn't be faulted for thinking this is going to be a filler episode. But I'm somewhere in the middle between you two. I didn't feel it was okay as much as Laura, and I felt it was, but I didn't feel it was as great as Michael did, or a lot of people I'm seeing on social media. I mean, I had people on SCN Live this morning who were with me on the show saying that they thought this was the greatest episode of The Mandalorian ever, and I was like, I wouldn't go that far, but for me, I enjoyed a lot of what was in here. I enjoyed the reveals. We finally solved an age-old question, a decades-long question that we've had about Boba Fett. Did he survive? Well, yes, he did, ladies and gentlemen. He wants his armor back. Daddy wants his armor back, and he's come to get it, and he's brought some friends along as well. And here's a little thing, because, Michael, you give compliments to Robert Rodriguez. This little something behind the scenes. Robert Rodriguez was not initially the director for this episode. He gave an interview, I think, a couple of days ago, and he said, I'm friends with Jon Favreau, and he needed a last-minute replacement for a director. So I said, sure, I'll come play in the Star Wars universe. What a dream. And it's fulfilled it's beyond my expectations. I mean, it was so fun. You can't imagine what it's like to walk on a set that has the classic look of the Empire Strikes Back feel and look. It's right after that era, right after Return of the Jedi. It's that era. So you really feel like you just walked into your childhood. So it's even, the task was even more monumental that you were coming in last minute to direct this episode. Mike, you've showrun things. You know, sometimes getting those directors to slide in at the last minute is not always the easiest thing. Will they get the rhythm? Will they get the vibe of the season? I think Robert really did. And handing him the reveal of Boba Fett back to life certainly must have been an incredible task to take on. And I think he did a great job. And we get more with the child, or Grogu, communicating with that place on the temple there on Tython, which of course looks like Stonehenge to me. Pretty insane. We get the return of Ming-Na Wen's character, and then we get the Dark Troopers finally showing what they can do, and we get more with Moff Gideon. So I think this episode is deceptively full of stuff in a short amount of time, and did an effective job of that.
Absolutely. I mean, I do think that, and we did speak about this last week. Like, you never know with Mandalorian, is he going to get to Tython right away?
Right.
Is he going to get waylaid? Are we going to not get to Tython until the big finale, and that's going to be the thing? And, you never quite know. And with this one, they didn't screw around. They got right to Tython and dove right in. And I do think that when you see that this is, I believe, the shortest episode of the season so far, I think you're right. I think it clocks in at exactly 34 minutes about. It would be easy to assume that this is going to be the filler on the way to Tython and whatever. And for 34 minutes, they packed a lot of information in there, which we are going to get into now.
Yeah, let's do that now. Yeah, when we pick up the opening of the episode, we see the Mandalorian Din Djarin there with Grogu having this great father-son moment. You can tell that he's kind of steeling himself. He's preparing himself to hand the child off. He's having a little Force playful moment with him, with the soon-to-be R.I.P. Razor's Crest right in there, just having this great moment with them. But we'll get to that. But they're having the great little father-son moment. Then they land on Tython. He brings him up to that temple there, sits him down in the middle, which to me looked like half a Death Star sticking out, rock formation in the middle of this weird kind of Stonehenge thing. Then he goes to look around, sees what's happening, and when he turns back around, Grogu is sending out his Force signal, so to speak. Then we see Slave One. So literally, it's right on top of each other. Everything that starts to happen here, Slave One shows up. Then we have this conversation between the Mandalorian and Boba Fett. Now, let's just stop there. What did you guys think about the opening, the way they just went right to it? We're at Tython, and this is the first episode where he isn't being asked to go on a mission for somebody else. This is singularly the Mandalorian's episode.
It's a really good point. I didn't even think about the fact that was, there really wasn't a side quest in this episode. He didn't have somebody coming to him asking for a favor. I really loved the opening. I loved the sort of father-son playing catch metaphor that we got with Grogu and Din Djarin, which was just adorable. Din Djarin at one point refers to Ahsoka as the nice lady, which I thought was just really kind of cute and funny. And so there were a lot of little tidbits at the beginning that I really liked. In terms of the sort of design of this sitting stone, I think is what Ahsoka called it. It did give me a lot of sort of Rebels feels. We go to a couple of Jedi temples in Star Wars Rebels, and I kind of feel like some of the design that was around the base of the round sitting stone kind of looked a little, I don't know, I couldn't pinpoint it in specifically, but it just gave me those sort of very much Jedi and Force warm feels that we don't get a ton of in this show because it's so much about the gunslinger. So I feel like the fans of who are really into the Force stuff in Star Wars and really into the weird Force stuff are probably really into this. One thing that I found sort of annoying with the sort of, call it a force field, literally what it was that kind of surrounds Grogu, is that Din Djarin tries 3 different times to penetrate this shield at one point. And I'm just did it need to happen 3 times? We had 34 minutes of content in this episode. That's all we got. And 3 times we had to try and get into it. It's he's the nice thing about Din Djarin is that he's not always stubborn and he always seems willing to learn. And so that just seemed a little bit out of character for me. I'm just we get it. You can't get into it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a little bit of, I have some other thoughts on the other stuff, but to your point, one of the things you want to do in the thing like that when you're writing is you want a little bit of escalation. He did the exact same thing the exact same way 3 times. Right. I think it wouldn't have been so sort of obvious if he had tried to press in the first time, had jetpacked the second time. If they had some escalation that he was getting more and more desperate, I think it would have added to the stakes of everything. So I did notice that too. As far as him and Grogu on the ship at the beginning, it's really interesting because I saw a meme this week that said, basically it was kind of joking around and it was a funny meme, but it kind of made the point that Mando and Grogu are not the main characters of the Star Wars universe at this point, that Ahsoka, with her mission to find Thrawn and Bo-Katan trying to get the Darksaber, they're these main characters in this epic galactic struggle, and Din Djarin is just this dude hanging out babysitting a kid, being I got to take my kid to the planet. Can someone help me out? And I actually think what's great about this opening scene that really grounds it and kind of disproves that a little bit is, I love the idea that with all of these epic things, with Ahsoka, Ezra, Sabine, Thrawn over here, with Moff Gideon and the Bo-Katan and the Darksaber over here, and these epic Star Wars level things that we're always used to, you've got this Mandalorian guy and this little baby, but this little baby might be the most important thing. And he's the only one that has this emotional bond. Everyone else wants him for a reason or looks at him as a symbol of the Jedi or for his M count. And he just loves him like a son. And I think that that moment, everything Laura said about the catch, the game of catch between them, it was really, really lovely. Yeah. As far as getting to the Jedi Temple on Tython, Laura, you are right. One of the things that is cool about it that I think you kind of picked up on without picking up on it, because I actually had to go look it up too, is the symbols that are on the sphere are Jedi symbols that date back to Ralph McQuarrie's concept art from the Battle of Yavin, Jedi symbols that didn't really get used in a lot of other things until an Old Republic video game, and then, as most things nerdy in Star Wars, Filoni used in Star Wars Rebels, where we really saw them a lot. So I think that Rebels vibe that you were getting was because the symbols that they're using, they get used in a lot of the temples that Kanan and Ezra visit in Rebels and all the Jedi stuff there. So I think that's what gave it that vibe. Because I totally agree with you.
Filling in those gaps. That's awesome.
Yeah, it totally. Because I was like, it was just to Johnny's point. It was Stonehenge with a stone in the middle, and yet even before you got the Force payphone, It was like, I feel Jedi-ish. This feels cool. And yeah, that's what it was. Like, Filoni uses those symbols a lot. So that's where that came from. So yeah, I thought it was it was really quick paced. It was a great setup. You sort of grounded the emotion, got to Tython. And yes, then, as I had said, I think in last week's episode or whenever we were talking about Boba Fett, I was like, Slave One is probably still parked somewhere on Tatooine. Yeah, and apparently it was because he hopped in that shit and drove right in. And I cannot describe the thrill that I got just seeing Slave One roll in there. It's such a cool ship. Yeah. When in Empire Strikes Back, it just was such a great design when it first appeared, and it still to date is such an amazing design. And seeing it just roll in, it's like, it's a great way of announcing what we're about to get into before we even see Tamora Morrison. Like, that ship is so iconic that it was like, oh, this is what's going down. Awesome.
Yeah. That's a fantastic point. To talk about the beginning, I love the moment between them, but I also love when he's like, we're going to do it without the windows, and he's just holding him and flying down. What a great sequence that was. And you're right, the Knights of the Old Republic, there's all of that connective tissue as well. Dr. Aphra in the comics, Tython is a part of that in Dr. Aphra when she tricks Vader, but also the blue butterfly. You mentioned the owl last week, Mike. That was something you caught. Like, the blue butterfly is something, too, that's important. You've seen in other media before with Star Wars as well. I thought that was important to see and be a part of this thing because it's been in various Star Wars stories. It was even on Endor, on the Battlefront, in the Battlefront games and on Clone Wars. So you've seen the blue butterfly before as a symbol, like you've seen the owl following Ahsoka as a symbol as well. So I thought that was great. And you're right, Mike, the introduction of Slave One, I think this is a great point. I was thinking about as you were talking, the way it was introduced, and once again, shows you the amount of money they're sinking into these episodes. It looked gorgeous. It looked badass. Gorgeous. It looked beautiful. The way it moved, it showed you that this was going to be a different Boba than we were used to seeing in Empire, in the Revenge of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back. All of that, or Return of the Jedi rather, and Empire Strikes Back, we're seeing a different Boba. This is not the Boba being played for laughs. This is going to be a badass Boba. And so just as soon as Tamora Morrison comes out and he's got that Tusken Raider spear or whatever that is, and the whole look of him overall, you're just like, oh crap, the scars on his face, all of it. He just looks immediately badass from the beginning in the first beginning. And what he says is, I don't want the kid. I want the armor that Cobb Vanth took from me, that the Marshal took from me. And I want to ask you two a question real quick. One, or two actually. One, how?
Yes, it's Boba Fett. Yes, it's Boba Fett.
Yes. Yes. Now I'm 100%. I texted Michael.
Oh, good. Finally.
Yeah. I texted Michael after the episode. I'm like, all right, fine. I'm at 100%. It is Boba. But two things. One, how does Slave One survive on a planet full of Jawa? I got to know how that happens. And why did he allow the Marshal to keep his armor for so long and only come and get it from Boba? Did it have to be taken from him for him to get it from him? I just don't understand what the mystery around that is.
Yep. Any theories, Laura?
I really don't. And it's one of those things where I keep hearing these rumors of like a Boba Fett spinoff series, which again, that's a series for someone. It's not the series for me. But it's inevitably going to be one of those things, if it does happen, that I end up loving, because that's what always happens. I wasn't really excited about the idea of a show about a Mandalorian, and here we are. But this is one of those things that I kind of wondered myself too. I'm just like, has he been on Tatooine the entire time? Right. He has the Slave One. It's functioning. It can fly. Clearly, I would think that he must have left the planet at some time, but then it brings it back to why in the hell, you're right. Why did he not ever go back and get his armor from Cobb Vanth? It just seems like it would have been so easy.
I trust this team enough to believe that they have an answer. Whether we all like the answer or not, it's like there's definitely movies sometimes where like something like this happens and you're like, they didn't give a shit. They didn't figure this out. These guys have figured, this creative team has figured so many things out. But yeah, a couple interesting things. Yeah, like with those Jawas literally stripping everything for parts, it is amazing that wherever Slave One was parked, I feel like it was like did Jabba the Hutt have like a special garage and it was like beep beep, like nobody could get in, but yeah, so Slave One, but like I do think it is interesting. Like I guess ostensibly Boba had Slave One. Maybe he has gone and come, but like whatever the reason is that he didn't take the armor from Cobb Vanth. I think there's a cool story there. And another thing, Johnny, you mentioned that he had the Tusken Gaffy stick, and it's also the big rifle he had is a Tusken cycler rifle, and then he had that big Gaffy stick that he was hitting people with, and even in the way he was dressed and everything, it seems like whenever he got out of the Sarlacc, he clearly was in bad enough shape that the Jawas came and just took his armor, because that's where Cobb Vanth got it from. And it also seems that in whatever shape he was in, it seems like the Tusken Raiders might have nursed him back. Like, he clearly has spent time with the Tusken Raiders.
Good point.
Because he's got their weaponry. Like, it's you don't just show up with the weapons of those people. And I think with the work that they did in that first episode of this season, kind of rounding out the Tusken Raiders so they weren't just sort of this faceless bad guy, and you did get that they had their own way of honor and whatever. Like, it seems like Boba spent time with them, and so whether he's just been with them the whole time, whether something about seeing what they were doing to the townsfolk made him go, well, I guess I'll let Cobb Vanth keep this for now. Like, it'll be interesting to see, but I think that there's definitely probably a story there that we will either hear more about in the next couple episodes, or if these episodes are just jam-packed and we don't get a lot of information, whether it be in a comic, a novelization, a spin-off series, I think we will get more of this Boba story at some point.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities in play now. Did he get out of that Sarlacc pit really quickly, or like relatively quickly, so he could start using that slave one? Did he go after he got out of it? Did he realize, hey, because remember he says, and we'll get to in just a second, he says this is not a spice stream later on in the episode. What does that mean? Does that mean Boba was like high on the spices and the Mandalorian lifestyle and drinking and doing all this stuff, having the ladies or whatever he was doing, and he wasn't really focusing on being the sharp, hard-edged bounty hunter that he should be? That's why he got his jetpack hit and ended up in the Sarlacc pit. Maybe he realized he had to stop being that way after he climbed out, but like left his armor and went on his own pilgrimage, maybe with the Tusken Raiders. Maybe took Slave One in and out, doing his whole thing. Remember, there's a legend stuff that speaks about him being some kind of protector or marshal himself in a different way without his armor. Maybe he went on that journey, and now he's back because he senses that there's something with the child that is important to the galaxy. So he is back to maybe kind of be a part of this and protect this child. Remember, he's not a bounty hunter anymore, so maybe he's back now to kind of take part in this overall bigger war, as you mentioned, with Ahsoka and Bo-Katan doing them. Maybe there's something bigger here that the child connects all these massive stories together. I don't know.
Well, one of the things. Well, there is an interesting connection that they did bring up, which I thought was interesting. I wrote it down when Boba Fett first meets Mando. He says, "I'm a simple man making my way through the galaxy like my father before me." Right. That is a double combo of Star Wars quotes.
Yes,
in Attack of the Clones, Jango Fett says to Obi-Wan, "I'm just a simple man trying to make my way in the universe." Right. And much more well known is Luke Skywalker saying, "I am a Jedi like my father before me." So they're really tying that together. Like that is a Star Wars gold mine of a line. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that we find out by the end of the episode is that Jango Fett, because there's been a lot of questions about, was Jango Fett a Mandalorian? Did he steal this armor? The comics that are now no longer canon implied that he fought in the Mandalorian Civil War. But in Clone Wars, the animated series, the Chancellor of Mandalore says he's just a common bounty hunter, that he has no idea how he got that armor. Mm-hmm. And by the end of it, Jango Fett is proven by Boba that he says he did fight in the Mandalorian Civil War and ultimately was like a foundling. Yeah. And so Jango Fett is a foundling, Mando is a foundling.
Yeah.
And Grogu, according to the Armorer, is a foundling. Yes. So when you look at connections, I think it's maybe less that Boba is stepping in to take on this grand mission, because I think he is sort of more of a grounded guy who's like doing whatever's in front of him, just like he shows up and says, "I just want my armor." But I do think that the idea that Jango Fett, Mando, and Grogu, Din Djarin, and Grogu all are foundlings, and this idea that they all found their way to being Mandalorians in a way, I think that's an interesting connection.
Yeah, but I need to know why he wants his armor right now. What Why does he want it right now? There has to be something behind that, and I hope they answer it over there.
Well, it's clearly not because it fits perfectly.
Yeah, listen, we'll get into that in a little bit. Not everyone can still fit into their high school jacket. I'm just putting that out there. All right, so we find out after they have a bit of an interaction between each other, between Boba and Mando, that Boba has a sharpshooter on the ridge. I didn't believe him at first, but then we look to the left, and Fennec Shand is there, Ming-Na Wen's character, who we thought was left for dead there on Tatooine earlier, and so she is there now. She comes down off the ridge after they all put down their weapons, and she shows the fact that she's had some mechanical work done, so to speak, inside of her stomach there to keep her alive, which of course brings back the whole thing with Darth Vader, the whole thing with Luke and his mechanical hand as well, all of that throughout this. So okay, let's stop here then. What was your feeling about having Fennec Shand coming back and being in cahoots with Boba? Because that was clearly Boba that found her in the first season and saved her life. And how did he do that? Does he have a degree in this kind of technology because his dad did it? Is that what this is part of? What do you got? What do you think, Vogel? Oh, I'm sorry. What do you think, Laura? Because Vogel was talking about. What do you think, Laura? Sorry, I have to distribute.
No worries. I was very, very excited to see Fennec Shand back. Actually, that was probably my favorite part of this episode. I was thoroughly proven wrong because I think I was on team. She's dead. She's not coming back. And whoever that was that came and found her was probably just Cobb Vanth. It definitely wasn't Boba Fett. You all are crazy. That was the season 1 mentality. Even after we saw Boba Fett, I was still just like, no, that was probably Cobb Vanth. Still, I don't know. But I think the lesson that we can learn here is that anytime we see any actor that has any kind of notoriety appear in The Mandalorian and then die, it sounds like they're going to come back. I think that's become like a pattern with this show. So hopefully they break that at some point, so it just becomes less predictable. But I really was excited to see her. Ming-Na Wen is fantastic. I loved her as this character. I love that she was teamed up with Boba Fett of all people, and then they teamed up with Din Djarin of all people. It was just this very unlikely dynamic that played out really well. And as little as I care about Boba Fett as a character, it was really fascinating to me to see his sort of evolution throughout this episode because of the way that he interacts with Din Djarin and the way their dynamic kind of goes back and forth was really fun and interesting to watch. I enjoyed that.
Mikey?
Those are some rockin' abs. That's what I thought. Those are some rockin' abs.
Those are wires. Those are wires.
Listen, I want to have core strength like that. But no, I thought it was cool. I like Laura. Should have known better. Ming-Na is a big enough name that you don't just bring her in for an episode. I thought she was dead. I was 100% on the she dead. So her like to the point that when Boba was like, there's a sharpshooter up there, she's got her eye on you. I was like, is it Aura Singh? Like I was going through my Rolodex of women who Boba has worked with. I was like, who is it? But so when it was her, I was like, oh, of course it's her. I'm an idiot. It's great. I love Ming-Na. I think it's great. I think she's she's one of the only people that has she's the Disney triple threat. She's a Disney princess, and she's in Marvel, and she's in Star Wars. So she's a badass. Don't mess with her. It was great to see her. And much like Laura, this dynamic of the three of them kind of being at odds with each other, and then instantly getting thrown into a situation where they all have to work together was just a ton of fun. And she's a badass.
Yeah. And before we get into the battle here, why do you think the Mandalorian doesn't want to give the armor back to Boba? I mean, is this part of this supposed cult thing that he's in, or his religious sect that he's in about the man? Is that what this is all about?
I think Din Djarin is supposed to be us in this situation, the audience. He's supposed to, you're not a Mandalorian, you don't get this armor. And now this is the comeback of, no, actually I am a Mandalorian, or my father was at least. If the armor belonged to him, let's see what I can do once I strap all this stuff on. Wait till, just wait and see. And I'll show you. But I think that was sort of what we were supposed to get out of it, was we were supposed to be Din Djarin in that situation.
Okay. And remember, Din knows way less than we know that Jango Fett was this dude. We know Boba Fett. As far as he knows, this is some dude who's like, hey, that's my armor. And he's like, you're not a Mandalorian, so you don't get it. He's been pretty consistent on his whole Beskar belongs with the Mandalorians. And I think that in the same way, I don't even want to say that they warm up to each other because there's not a lot of time for like emotional exposition. But after fighting with each other and kind of being on each other's side, like they definitely both grow to respect each other. And I think that realization at the end that that Jango Fett was a foundling just like Din, it's like, okay, yeah, this is legit yours.
As warriors do. I mean, I didn't respect Laura Kelly until I saw her in the Schmodown tournament. Then I realized she could really bring it. She was tough as nails. No, I'm just joking. The other thing I think, which is great here, is that you once again you proved every episode that Din Djarin very much believes in the tenets of his of what he's been taught in this Mandalorian sect. It's a very strong foundation of who he is. But in every episode, it also seems to get challenged by a different person every time. Bo-Katan, that's two Mandalorians now, Bo-Katan and Boba Fett challenging him. And are you surprised when he says the names that Mando doesn't have a reaction to that? Have they not been told about Jango or Boba or anybody? He didn't really seem to have a reaction to this.
Why would he?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's just more like that he doesn't know about the Jedi. He doesn't know about this kind of things. He's been very singularly trained to not know about the history necessarily of Mandalore that much.
A couple things on that. I've been talking a lot, Laura. Do you want to weigh in on that?
Well, I think the only point that I would probably make was that the Empire made a very concerted effort to erase the Jedi from existence, which makes me think that they probably made a pretty strong effort to erase a lot of different aspects of history. One of them might be the clone army and how it was created and who it was created from.
Yeah, as far as two things, two parts of that. As far as the Jedi part of it goes, Laura's 100% right. They one of the ways that they've sort of retconned this 20 odd years between Sith and New Hope is to say they kind of say in Rogue One when they blow up the temple on Jeddah, they actually say this is like the final remnants of the Jedi. Like they've been erasing the Jedi history. Also, in season 7 of Clone Wars, when Ahsoka meets the Martez sisters, you get a very different you get a very different opinion about the Jedi. We see the Jedi as these heroes who are in the war. They're like, these people don't care about us. They're just off doing their whatever, and they're not looking out for the common folk. And on top of all of that, Children of the Watch seems like a very closed off sect where they are training a very specific way of thinking of things and not even including the rest of the history. So the fact that people, it's something to always remember about Star Wars is that we as the audience are privy to the most important people in the galaxy doing the most important things that need to happen. And most people in the galaxy are not aware of all of those details. So it's not 100% surprising. And on the Mandalorian front, he's been raised by these Children of the Watch and thought that was all there was. And I think it's kind of neat. It kind of is a echo of season 1, we watched him kind of change his opinion on droids over the course of, that was sort of his thing. I hate droids. And then you had the IG-11 moment. And season 2 is opening him up in a similar way, but just about Mandalorians and what it means to be a Mandalorian. So I think it's kind of neat.
Season 1 is when you leave your family's home to go to college. Season 2 is leaving college to go out to the workforce. I think you change your mind about a lot of things. That's for sure.
Expanding your mind, man.
Timothy Leary Mandalorian. That's what I want to see. I want to see that sect of those. But anyway, we get now let's get into it. The battle. The battle happens here. Stormtroopers landing from what we find out later is Moff Gideon's ship. They all come down. These transports, and they all come out a la like D-Day, like we've seen in Saving Private Ryan. They all kind of run out when this thing goes down, and they're getting shot at by both Bing Na and Boba. But Din Djarin only cares about the child. Runs up there to Grogu to try to save Grogu, and as Laura mentioned, gets smashed back by the Force again. But to be fair, every single time he goes, he gets further in and then gets shot back out. So maybe there's something to that. I don't know. Eventually, we see Boba kick in mad ass because he's got his armor on, doing all his things with the spear. Destroy. I mean, apparently somebody said this morning it was candy glass is what these helmets of the stormtroopers are made of. He was destroying people.
Have we ever seen a stormtrooper helmet shatter like that?
I haven't. No, I don't know. Have you guys? I didn't see.
I made a note that said, is all of their armor just made of dried ramen noodles? It just cracks and falls apart like it's nothing. It's so bizarre to me.
Jay Washington had a great tweet. He goes, "What is the possible benefits and package of being a stormtrooper. What are you possibly getting out of this? Because you're just getting, and this is old school. I love the old school look of the stormtroopers coming out. You had the dude with the orange shoulder pad who's in charge of them, in essence. Is it a pauldron? I think it's what it's called, a pauldron, that what he's wearing. All of that in charge of them, but they seem to come out in large numbers from a small ass transport.
I saw somebody online referred to the stormtrooper transports that landed as Imperial clown cars.
Yeah,
because they were just pouring out of those things. But I do like, you are right. There is something just intensely satisfying as an old school Star Wars fan about seeing a squadron of classic stormtroopers come out with the classic weapons. Like they had that E-Web blaster, that giant blaster that they have to set up that we first saw in Empire, and they're just, and so A, it's great to see that, and then B, it's just, they're just cannon fodder for these three badass warriors, and just watching them all sort of do their thing. Everything from Fennec Shand using her rockin' abs to knock that rock off the cliff, to then like Mando to Din kind of landing in front of her and like using his Beskar armor to take all the shots while they worked as a team, to then, like you were saying, Johnny, Boba goes and gets his armor and shows up, and I think sort of it was almost like everyone on the Mando creative team was like, we really got to make up for how he went down in Return of the Jedi like a loser, and we're going to remind everybody why they love Boba Fett in the first place. And boy, despite my joke about him fitting in his armor, you do what you do. Tamora Morrison is the size that he is. It is what it is. But like, it almost made it even cooler in a way. You see this guy who's okay. Maybe it's a stretch.
Maybe your that's dad putting on his old football jersey from high school, and I was like, I could see how you once did look cool wearing that. But I don't know. Anyway,
I like how they paired it with the big gaucho pants this time. That was kind of a fun look.
Yeah,
like the same pants that Ahsoka had in the last episode.
Let me put it this way. They did what they could do to make it look awesome, and he legitimately was a fucking badass fighter.
Hell yeah, he
really was.
And I think you're right, Mike. I think they used this episode to very much reform what had been the jokes at Boba Fett's expense for many decades, because people have always been like, why does everyone think he's such a badass? He barely did anything. And I was like, no, you have to go and read the stories, read the legends, read the other stuff. Those flesh it out. But yeah, you had to show him, and he kicked a lot of, I love the rockets that come out of his knee pads, which apparently in the past have been poison darts that he can shoot. All of that stuff was great to see, all the things he could use.
And apparently, we've never actually seen the missiles come out of the knee pads. Apparently, that was only ever mentioned in like one of those Star Wars visual guidebooks about Boba Fett. They mention that his knees had these like missile launchers in them or whatever, but we've never seen them. And again, it's just one of those crazy things where this team is like so entrenched in Star Wars that they're like, oh, it's in the book. We are going to do
John's
this
like,
thing.
Excuse me, let me
Mr.
find
Filoni,
it really
Mr. Filoni, Mr. Filoni, I found the knee rockets, Mr. Filoni. Yeah, it's like that. It's basically like that. So it's like, yeah, but it was great to see, and they all acquit themselves well. Fantastic battle. But of course, this is all dead. Then eventually the stormtroopers. And then, by the way, that moment where Ming-Na Wen or Fennec Shand knocks the boulder, obviously an homage to George Lucas and Raiders of the Lost Ark, that boulder going down.
Which, just complete sidebar, but something I just learned recently.
Yeah.
The Raiders of the Lost Ark ball is an homage to Uncle Scrooge comics back in the day, and Uncle Scrooge inspired Indiana Jones. So Uncle Scrooge in his adventures inspire Indiana Jones and the ball, which then is referenced in Mandalorian. So my point is, everything goes back to DuckTales. Anyways, back to Star Wars. Carry on.
Isn't DuckTales Disney?
Yeah.
So it's everything does go.
So now it's all part of the circle of life, guys. Anyways, yes, it was a great Raiders reference for sure.
Yeah, it was. So the transports eventually they all take off, and then we see the Dark Troopers come down. And Din Djarin running up that hill because he had taken off the jetpack. It occurred to us, like, why don't you put on the jetpack? Why did you put on the jetpack? But I guess just in that desperate moment, running up the hill, trying to get to the child or trying to get to Grogu, doesn't get there in time. The Dark Troopers look badass, man. I mean, to juxtapose them to the original trilogy Stormtroopers look, which is cool. But like seeing the Dark Troopers is like, dude, this is next level. They grab Grogu and they take him up to the ship. Boba follows along and then sees Gideon's huge ship there and reports back that it's there and all that's happening. So what did you guys think about them taking the child and everything that happened right afterwards with the Dark and then the look of the Dark Troopers? Mikey?
And the destruction of the Razor Crest.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. We were going to get to that. I wanted to pull it aside for just a second,
right.
but yes, go ahead.
Just wanted to make sure we talked about it because it hit me very deeply. Yeah, I mean, look, it's like I said earlier at the beginning of this review, it's something kind of you knew was going to happen. Like, you know that at some point Moff Gideon's going to have to get the upper hand. I love that little Grogu so much, and I don't like seeing him in peril. It's very upsetting to me. And yes, the Dark Troopers looked amazing. I hope we get to see them do more. That first reveal of them and seeing so many of them was such a big thing. So like seeing these 4 come down and just like take Grogu and take off like was great. But I want to see these guys in action too.
Yeah.
That was my complaint as well. I'm like, they looked fine, but we didn't really see them do anything. So it'd be nice to actually see them in action. Hopefully that happens soon.
I mean, particularly those, I forget what they were called, but those droids that the Magistrate had last week in Ahsoka's episode, you just had some really cool moments with those droids. I mean, the Dark Troopers seem like they are much more of a threat than those old school droids that she had, but those droids had some cool moments and like flipping up onto the roofs and stuff. So I just really hope we get some more Dark Trooper action in the next 2 episodes. I have a feeling we will.
Yeah, I think so too. And let's get into it. I mean, in the history of time, and maybe Mike or Laura can correct me, I don't recall Star Wars, who loves to sell toys, ever purposely destroying one of their ships. Star Trek does it all the time. The Enterprise gets blown up all the effing time. But I have never seen... I mean, the bucket of bolts is still hanging around, for God's sakes. The Falcon is. So when they blew up the Razor's Crest, I stopped the episode. Because I was like, are you fucking kidding me? No! You blow up Slave One, that thing's 900 years old. Don't you blow up the Razor's Crest. And especially after they'd done all that work to fix it back up again, to have it get blown up. I was really surprised by that. Were you both shocked that happened?
I gotta say, my first thought was, oh my God, if this is what they're referring to with the title, The Tragedy, that is so freaking funny. Because we hadn't seen the whole stuff with Baby Yoda happen yet. I was so convinced. I was so convinced. I was like, that is so freaking funny. Because somebody messaged me later and they're like, yeah, all those people that bought the I think it was like $300 or $400 Lego set of the Razor Crest were like so pissed. I'm like, ooh, yikes! But we see a Razor Crest in the Rise of Skywalker.
Yep.
People we're kind of assuming like, oh, that means like maybe they're involved somehow in that era still. I mean, I have a feeling he's gonna get another one. So, when it comes to the whole like toy sales thing, I have a feeling it's going to come back. My whole thing with the Razor Crest for like the entire time it's been on this show, I'm just kind of annoyed with how like what a piece of shit it is sometimes when it's like constantly falling apart. I'm like, just get it fixed so that it stays fixed. God, but that's a weird personal thing that I have with it. Yeah. I did not mourn the Razor Crest as much as the rest of the internet did, I think.
We talked about this a few weeks ago when we were talking about the Razor Crest. Having worked at Hasbro, I know that the Millennium Falcon is held up as like one of the greatest vehicle toys of all time, and that people love the Falcon. And for most of Star Wars, the Falcon, as Johnny said, is a bucket of bolts that's not working. I mean, for most of Empire, the thing is fucking broken. Yeah. And so I think they've done an amazing... opposite counterpoint to Laura, I really have grown fond of the Razor Crest. I'm not a guy who falls in love with the ships. Like I think they're all cool looking. I think the design of ships is great. But for most ships in Star Wars, I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Like it looks great, but I don't get emotionally invested. And I really kind of have fallen in love with the Razor Crest to the point that when that happened, I was like, oh, fuck, man. Like, come on. I do think that, I mean, there's not a lot to rebuild from, so he'll probably have to get a new one. But I do think that Mando will get himself a new Razor Crest at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure he will at some point. I just want to see the video of the nerd walking into his Lego constructed Razor Crest and just smashing it out of anger for it having been broken. I just want to see that video. No. Anyway, so all right, so then we realize we go into. Is that a destroyer that Gideon is on? Is that what you would call?
Mando called it a cruiser, but I kind of assumed it was a Star Destroyer.
It is actually not a Star Destroyer. It is.
Look it up. Look it up.
It is a Arkeeton class light cruiser.
If you say so. Yeah.
Which has not been seen in any of the movies, but has been seen in Star Wars Rebels. The light cruisers are what some of the Imperial troops are flying in there. So it is not actually an Imperial Star Destroyer. It's a little bit smaller. It's a light cruiser. But yes, I was also curious about that, so I looked it up. I don't think I'm actually pronouncing Arkeeton yet correct, but that is what it is.
Okay, so we go up there. We see. If I might get this chronologically correct, do we go up to the ship there, or do we go up to the ship at the end? Is that what happens? I don't remember it distinctly just yet.
Mando,
Gideon's at the end. And so basically, sorry, I just clarified it. Gideon's at the end. So when all this happens, we go back down. Mando finds the ball, which is a great little moment. Nice callback from the beginning of the episode. And the Beskar spear, which a lot of people are speculating is what he's going to use to fight Moff Gideon. It is not going to be Ahsoka Tano, a lightsaber battle with Moff. It's going to be Mando with the Beskar spear against Gideon with that dark saber. So we shall see. But Boba and Ming-Na, they pledged their allegiance to him because the deal was you give me the armor, we will protect the child. Well, they let letting the child get taken. They feel indebted to him. So now we have 3 people on board here. Then we go to where I'm sorry, what's the Navarro? Is it Navarro? And then he's talking to Cara Dune, and she has joined the New Republic and going to be a part of that, but then saying she has to follow the rules. And he's looking for, of all people, he's looking for Bill Burr. Give me a fucking break. But it's there. We're going to have to deal with it for the next 2 episodes. So what do you guys think about all of this team he's assembling to go after Moff Gideon?
Well, before that, just really quickly, one thing I want to say about the Empire moment. I know. You know what's so funny? I don't have as much of a problem, but when I saw that that's who he was going for, I was like, oh, Johnny gonna be mad. Johnny gonna be mad.
Moff Gideon. What do you want here, Moff Gideon? Yeah, no.
One of the things I think is neat, and we've talked about this before, but I do love, again, the way we see other people react to things. Like, we know that the Empire is going to become the First Order. We know that Starkiller Base is coming. But, like, that moment where Boba sees them and he's like, it's the Empire, they're back. And the reaction is, no, they're not. The New Republic is out here now doing it. Like, they're just, it's the constant little ways that they're reminding us at this point in Star Wars history that most people think the war is, the Empire's gone. And this is the group of people that are dealing with the Empire and going, like, keeping in mind that Luke Skywalker, Leia, Han, all the people that we know from Return of the Jedi, that we meet again in Force Awakens, like, Leia's going to get wise to it later on and form the Resistance. But as of right now, Mando, Boba, Fennec, like Cara, like, these are the people that know the Empire's back, and Greef Karga, and nobody else knows. And I think that's kind of a cool story to be telling. I also somebody pointed out that when Kara's going through the prison logs of the New Republic's prison logs, there's like 1,000 action figures just waiting to happen. Like, they go through all these characters that actually have names if we were, back in the olden days, every one of them would have an action figure.
True.
I'll be curious to see. I know that the Chapter 6, The Prisoner, was not a lot of people's favorite episode in Season 1. I thought it was a lot of fun. I know that next week, the next episode is going to be written and directed by Rick
Famuyiwa.
Famuyiwa. He's written and directed it, and he did The Prisoner. And I'll be curious to see. I mean, like you said, with Filoni, with Bryce Dallas Howard, everyone who had episodes last season that some people had issue with came back super, super strong this season. Yeah. So I'm hoping that even though Bill Burr's character, Miggs Mayfield, is not everyone's favorite, Johnny, and that The Prisoner was not everyone's favorite episode of Season 1, I'm hoping that he too comes back strong, and you kind of see The Prisoner is the only episode last season that didn't really tie into the season finale. So it'll be interesting to see how all of this ties into where we are now.
Laura?
You know
What do you
who
think?
no one wanted to have come back? It's not just John Rocha. I feel like no one is asking for Bill Burr to come back to Star Wars. It's just absurd. It's so ridiculous. I hated him on SNL this season. That was so awful.
Oh yeah, that
Um,
was. Ugh.
Oh, that
it
was
was
bad. That
Yeah, that
was
if
was
bad.
anyone
uncomfortable.
knows what the quality of SNL has been in recent years, this was so bad. It
Yeah.
was so bad. Like anyway, yeah, so I'm not excited for that. I love that you brought up the First Order though, Michael, because it's really interesting to watch that last scene with Gideon and Grogu and the stormtroopers. If you can hear the First Order theme playing in the
Yep.
background, and
Great
it's
point.
just
You
so
sure
I
can.
had like this weird out of body experience where I'm just like I felt like my worlds were colliding a little bit. So that was interesting and weird and fun. And also yeah, really sad because poor baby Grogu got stunned, but also really interesting because like Moff Gideon just seemed so delighted to see him again. Like he was like smiling the whole time. I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh my god, you're a psycho.
Well, sadist.
And not only that, but also clearly has had Grogu before.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Like something that like people may have assumed or thought, like it kind of confirmed by this that like it's not that Moff Gideon has been on the trail of Grogu. He had Grogu at some point. He's like, oh, I know that you get tired, so you're not going to be able to do this anymore. No. Like he clearly was like Grogu had come back into his care, which I thought was really interesting. But yeah, to your point, in the past 2 episodes, Ludwig Göransson has done a great job. In chapter 13, we got that great little riff of Yoda's theme,
Yeah.
and of course Ahsoka's theme from Clone Wars and Rebels kind of played throughout, and like that little hint of the First Order theme. It's really cool how they're using music to tie us into these different eras.
Yeah. Do we yeah, I mean, do we think that it was Gideon who stole Grogu out of that temple before everything that happened with Anakin and whatever? Like could he have taken him and then it was taken from him? So is that possible as well? Like everyone's been speculating that it was Darth Maul or somebody else who took a Grogu out of there before anything happened. Is it possible that it was Gideon because he had his own plans for the situation?
He would have been young. What is
okay.
that? Well, Revenge of the
50
Sith
years
would have
ago.
been
Right?
no. There's
Well-
18, 19, 20,
About 30 years before.
Yeah.
yeah, about 30 years. About 30 years. So he could have like it's possible.
Okay. 30 years is do the right thing, Giancarlo Esposito. So to me, that works. He's in the equation.
It's a good point. Very
Just
good.
saying, he's an adult 30 years ago. So I could see that happening, but maybe not. We'll see. I'm sure it'll be explained. But yeah, Mike, you're absolutely right. It felt very clear that he had previous relationships or connection with Grogu. Just the way he says, "Oh, you've gotten better at that." Just the way he said that is, of course, having seen how he was before. But also, it gave. I don't know if you two got that vibe as he was choking them and slamming them into each other. It gave me that vibe of Sith Lord Grogu. I'm just saying, in my mind, I started seeing that he could be used for evil. And the way he was playing with those stormtroopers, like tossing them back and forth. And yes, it exhausted him, but still, it was like playing with your food almost. I got a weird feeling about that as I was watching.
I think you're a little bit more on the Grogu is secretly evil train than I am.
I'm saying he could turn bad. I'm just saying he is.
I do think. Look, they do force choking is definitely a dark side thing. And they use it. He did it to Cara Dune. He thus far he's only using it in a protective stance. Like he did it to Cara Dune in season 1 because he thought Mando was threatened, and here he's clearly just trying to protect himself. And it was thrilling to open that door and see him just kicking all kinds of Force ass for a few minutes. I'm like, oh, this is some shit. But yeah, like even in Clone Wars, they did it really well with Anakin, even though they really turned Anakin into like this really heroic Jedi. Like when he couldn't get what he wanted, he was not above a Force choke. So the Force choke is definitely a symbol of the dark side kind of rearing its head. And the dark side is through fear, whether that is his fear in protecting Mando, as Ahsoka said, those connections can lead to the dark side, or the fear that he has of being in the Empire's hands. Like, I do think that he could go down a bad road. And I think per Ahsoka's point in chapter 13, there, like I said last week, there's all this discussion that connection can lead to the dark side, but I also think connection can lead to the light side as well. And I think his connection with Din is actually ultimately going to be the thing that keeps him from going down that road.
What do you think, Laura?
I think the danger with the dark side Grogu stuff comes from the fact that he has a total and complete lack of training, and it can come, I think, from a lack of training or from a lack of good training. I mean, think about characters like Ezra Bridger, who had a master. He had Kanan Jarrus to be guiding him along the way, and he still strayed and had some dark side tendencies. So I think it's something that any Force user can be vulnerable to. And when you're talking about a character as vulnerable as Grogu is, being essentially a baby, I think that's gonna rear its head every now and then. It's gonna come up inevitably. I don't necessarily think it's something that's going to determine his fate going to the dark side ultimately, but I think that it is going to be something that he's going to continue to struggle with until he gets proper training and learns how to control it. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to explore, and I really enjoyed sort of bringing in the Kylo Ren First Order theme when that was happening. I also enjoyed this little detail of the stormtroopers. You could hear them screaming as Moff Gideon was walking down the hall, and I appreciated that a little bit too. I was kind of like, what am I hearing? I thought I was like hearing something in my apartment. It was awesome.
What'd you think about him toying with him, Laura, with the Darksaber? That seemed a bit I don't know. That seemed even more evil that he was messing with him with the Darksaber. And he says, you're not ready to play with these things yet. What'd you think?
That felt a little bit of like Darth Maul at the end of Solo for me. I'm just like, they just brought it out so that he could wave it around and show us again. They just wanted to show it off. Like,
that's how dudes are, Laura. We're terrible like that.
Yeah, they really are. I'm just like, there was just no purpose to it. They were just like, ooh, look. Like, it was just something shiny. But I'm sure there was a bigger purpose to it, but that's just how I read it.
Usually with stuff like that, like when I saw that, kind of similar thing, there's no real reason for him to do it. It's usually like a reminder moment. You have to, like, sometimes you just like remind the audience, even though we've been on board the whole time, they always put those little things in there. And like, you had that moment at the end where Din kind of took the Beskar spear out of the rubble. Right. And so he's holding the Beskar spear, he's holding Grogu's little ball, that's the only two things that survived, and then you kind of go to Moff Gideon and you see the Darksaber. And I think Johnny's right. It's kind of like just reminding you that these two main characters in this struggle of the season have these two weapons, so that as we go into these next two episodes, which I think most of us are assuming are going to be a big epic two-parter, kind of the way season 1 was, that these are the weapons of our hero and villain for this season.
All right, let's speculate that as we wrap up here, because we're almost at an hour now. He sent the call out, so we wonder if a Jedi will show up before the end of these next two episodes or not. And also, we don't know who's going to show up. We'll see. And also, this idea is the next episode just going to be them breaking Bill Burr out of prison? Is that what we're going to do? And then laying a little more of the groundwork for what we're going to see. I mean, this is essentially, bringing the band back together, or the Avengers coming together to take on Thanos. This is what it feels like a little bit to me, picking up everybody to come along on this battle or adventure.
Yeah.
Mikey?
Laura, what do you think?
Yeah, Laura?
I mean, I think, this is going to be an excuse to bring a bunch of these characters back. I mean, we're going to see Bill Burr. I almost have a feeling that we're going to see that these, like, the Dave Filoni and Carson, the Rebel pilots, or New Republic pilots, excuse me, bring them back into the fray. I wonder if we're going to see any of the other characters, because the assumption is that they're all of the characters from, was it episode 5 last season, were all in this prison together. And I wonder if we're just going to bust all of them out and try and recruit all of them for help. I kind of hope not. But they're all going to be there, so it'd almost be kind of weird if we didn't at least see them. I'm not sure. I'm looking to sort of 2-part finale that I hope that we're getting, but I have a feeling that there's going to be kind of another side quest of trying to get Bill Burr, and then him probably betraying Mando in some fashion, because that just seems like the guy he is, and that's going to lead us down a whole nother rabbit hole. But who knows?
Yeah, it is funny. I as much as I want to give like Rick Famuyiwa and everybody like the benefit of the doubt, and I do give them the benefit of the doubt. They've not led us astray so far in the bigger picture of things. Yeah, when I'm thinking of all the things that I'm excited about that I want to see. I want to see more Boba Fett action. I'd love Cobb Vanth to come back. I want Ahsoka to get in there somehow. I want to find out more about Thrawn. I want to see if anyone is going to answer Grogu's call. I'm not really super interested about a Prison Break episode. Like that is probably lower on my list of things that I'm super excited to see. That being said, they've proven time and again that when they want to speed up the pace, like I think one of the things they do really well and that they did last season in their Chapter 7 was we got so used to sort of this pace of Mandalorian that when they all of a sudden sped up and got the band together in like the first 5 minutes, it was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
So are we going to have to watch an entire episode of a Prison Break before we get to the last episode and all the action? Or do we just open up and they've just broken them out like boom and we get into it? And so it'll be interesting to see kind of where the pacing of all that is. And like I said, like they ultimately season 1, as much as the complaint was all of these missions are kind of separated, I don't really know what the bigger picture is, they certainly stuck the landing. Yeah. And this season has been even stronger throughout. And so I have no doubts that they will stick the landing, but I'm really curious to see how they do it and how this Prison Break ties into it.
Yeah, and it'd be weird to ask Rick to direct 2 Prison Break episodes. That would be weird, right? I mean, like, hey, you had one shot. Maybe you could do a little bit better second time around. It's like I would hate to have him. If I'm an established director, I would hate that responsibility. It wouldn't make any sense. So we'll wrap up here this spoiler review of season 2, episode 6. The tragedy here, chapter 14 of The Mandalorian. Hope you all enjoyed the room. Hope we gave you something to chew on, to think about as we head into these last 2 episodes before we take our Christmas breaks. And then WandaVision shows up on January 15th. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, exactly. Laura.
Dink, Ferrick.
Yeah, exactly. Laura, any final words? And please plug anything and everything that you got going on.
Sure. Final thoughts. I mentioned at the beginning that this episode left me wanting a little bit in some aspects. I think that component that we had of Grogu on the Sitting Stone and the Force Field and reaching out through the Force to try and contact other Jedi, I would have liked to have seen that play out a little bit more. I think if this had been an animated series, that would have played out on screen. And I would have gotten a little bit more satisfaction out of that moment. Maybe we would have heard somebody talking, or we would have actually gotten to see a little bit of what Grogu was seeing. That's what I was wanting a little bit, or at least that's part of what I was wanting this episode. But overall, while it wasn't my favorite episode this season, I'm really excited that other people are excited about it. I love that there are some people out there that are as excited about this episode as I was about last week's. That makes me really happy because that was just like euphoric happiness for me last week. So if you're experiencing that right now, awesome. Good on you. But yeah, in the meantime, you can find me and my other show on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @up_Laura. That's right down there. My show is @ForceToastPod, where I host podcasts with my friend where we drink wine and talk about Star Wars.
There you go. Mike?
Yeah, I thought this was a blast. Like I said, I think that this episode, although it had some big surprises and moments, like the big things that happened in this episode were things that we all at least assumed were coming. So, but I think these were the pieces that needed to get put into place to move all the characters on this chessboard to the locations that we need them to be, so that these next 2 episodes can really blow us out of the water. R.I.P. Razor Crest, Grogu phone home, lots of good stuff here. So yeah, I'm really excited to see where this lands. This has been a hell of a ride this season. And this, I think I read in an article somewhere, somebody said that the way that Filoni, Favreau, and team are handling Star Wars in Mandalorian is a course study in all the ways that J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson, for whatever your opinions are on them, on their individual films, the way that they did not handle Star Wars in that trilogies. And I think that there's some good truth there. Again, not saying that any of those individual movies are bad, good, whatever your tastes are. If you like them, they're great. But the threads that they're weaving between the old and the new and these new characters and tying it into everything else, I think is really, really well done. And you can follow me at MKToon, which is right down there. And you can tune in for these lovely reviews, or you can see me, Johnny, and our Geek Buddy Shannon McClung on our weekly episodes of Geek Buddies.
Yeah. And speaking of Shannon, we're planning on him being back next week, both for Geek Buddies and for the reviews of The Mandalorian. So thank you, Laura, so much for sitting in. We might ask you to come on back and do a 4-person panel.
Yeah, hey, why not?
If you've got the time, we love it. We've loved your input. We loved your points of views, and the fans have as well. So it'd be a lot of fun if you have time to come on and join us again and kind of end the season with you as well. I will say this. I enjoyed the episode. Didn't 100% love the episode, but I certainly enjoyed the episode. I think the number one thing for me about this episode is the whole season, they've been kind of leaning into these 70s, 80s type serial shows that we used to get way back in the day, like Incredible Hulk, Bionic Man, those Kung Fu, those kinds of shows that we had back in the 70s and 80s. And this was the perfect encapsulation of that as an episode. Just Ming-Na running across that whole ridge as she's getting shot at. That is total 70s stuff. It was so much fun to see and feel that again and get those vibes again. So I took a lot of joy out of a lot of the things that Robert Rodriguez did. And I thought he directed this episode really, really well. Whether you enjoy the overall effect of it or what was revealed, that's a separate conversation. But direction-wise, I thought he did a stellar job, and I hope they give him an episode next season to do as well. That would be a lot of fun. And maybe something more expansive, maybe out in space, and see what Robert can do with some CGI and some extra stuff. But the battle sequences were well shot, well directed, and everything that happened around it, I thoroughly enjoyed. So you can find me at The Rocha Says on Twitter and on Instagram. And thank you all so much for watching our review or listening to our review as we put them up on the Geek Buddies podcast feed as well. Remember to like and share this video and leave a comment down below. The more likes, the more comments you leave, it elevates the visibility of the show, please. And also don't forget, we do the Geek Buddies, as Mikey said, but also the Jedi Way. Laura and I do that show every couple of weeks. We just dropped the most recent episode. If you haven't watched it, we go through the history of Ahsoka Tano and start to maybe guess about what's coming next for her down the road. So that was a great episode. A lot of fun. So there you go. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Be well. Have a good weekend. And come on back and join us for another episode review of The Mandalorian here on the
Geek
Buddies.